Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the nation right here, TOD Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Welcome to the show. It's a great show for you guys today. We've got a lot of different stories, a little bit different than most of the stories. We actually have a lot of positive news. Holy crap. We got a lot of positive news. We've got progressive news, interesting stuff, updates, of course. And then Betsy DeVos, you're not going to want to miss that story. We're going to start out with that, actually. It's a lot of fun. Then, of course, an update to the live stream that I did last night on the, what was it? The impeachment of Rod Rosenstein. So we got an interesting update on that one. I'm not going to spoil it. Just a lot of stuff. I mean, we got notes on top of notes here. So we got a lot of stuff. So it's going to be a fun show. So if you haven't already, please share the stream. Very, very important. That helps the show. That helps us, obviously. And might actually help you guys, too. Get the word out. But anyway. So, we also have the story that people have been requesting. We're going to talk about Julian Assange as well and what's going on with him. In the Ecuadorian embassy. So, of course, that was requested, and I will deliver. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's start out with a little bit of fun. Okay. So it appears an unknown vandal has damaged one of Betsy DeVos's $40 million yachts. Now, according to the Huron Police Department, an unknown person decided they would unmoor the yacht and just let it go free as it was sitting in Huron, Ohio. Now, this happened the past weekend, so we're just finding out about it, apparently, or it is just trending. Now, this vessel, which is worth, as I said before, $40 million, was unmoored and ended up crashing into the dock. Now, the yacht, called Sequest, is one of 10 yachts owned by the DeVos family, and it sustained between $5,000 and $10,000 worth of damage in scrapes and scratches. Oh my God. Somebody scratched Betsy DeVos's $40 million yacht. Whatever is she going to do? I know. Poor woman. Look, I know. People are freaking out about the untying of the yacht. Because, look, that is vandalism, and I'm not in favor of that, and yada, yada, all that stuff. That said, I'm not exactly upset about it. And really, the main focus of the story for me is that this is just one of 10 yachts that the DeVos family owns worth $40 million. Now, look, I don't know if all of their yachts are worth $40 million, but say they were. That would be $400 million spent on boats. $40 million. I'm sorry, $400 million. Spending $500 million on a bunch of yachts. How many yachts does a family freaking need? And look, the reason that I say that is because, look, while she's, sailing around in your freaking yacht, we have people with student loans that are being crushed, right? Like people that have gone to college on the promise of getting a good job and or a good paying job, wages have stagnated. And so, they're working at these jobs that maybe they're overqualified for or not in their field or they don't pay enough and they're getting crushed by the payments. Look, again, I just mentioned wage stagnation, right? Most recent statistics showed that inflation actually wiped out any wage gains over the past year. So again, we are flat. Wages are flat. Working people's paychecks are basically stagnant while healthcare continues to increase in price. Education increases in price. Food, gas, all that stuff. All this while Betsy DeVos has a frickin' yacht. there's some problems here. Okay, but this is America. Now, that said, that's not the only issue to have with Betsy DeVos, of course. The fact that she's obscenely wealthy and doesn't seem to do a whole lot with it. She's also directly responsible for slashing student debt relief, for those students that do have these student loans out there that they really can't afford. Rolling back rules designed to help students defrauded by colleges. So, for example, you had a bunch of like Corinthian colleges, and you had Trump University and things like that, basically defrauding students. And they've got these enormous loans that they still have to pay back, even though they were defrauded. They were given a fraudulent education. The Obama administration came back and they're like, okay, well, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to allow you to get your student loan forgiven. Now, that still, of course, costs you because that counts as income on taxes and things like that. So students still have to pay. Nonetheless, at least they're not paying a student loan for the next 20, 30 years. So there is some positive. The Obama administration did try to address the situation with those for-profit colleges. And Betsy DeVos, as soon as she gets in, she says, nope, here's what we're going to do. We're going to not do that. My friends in the for-profit college industry, well, they're losing money. So how about we not do that? It's your fault you got that loan. Your fault you got defrauded. I mean, it's not our fault. It's not our responsibility, I should say, to cover for your mistake. No, screw these students. Not only that, but she's also rolled back protections for transgender students and directed funds away from public schools, which, of course, she wants to go and shovel into for-profit charter schools. That's the real damage that's being done because of Betsy DeVos. So I'm sorry if I'm not sad about her yacht getting scratched up, having a little bit of damage. Because the damage that she's doing to our education system, to our country, is worth far more than a yacht. Okay. Let's move on here. Okay. Hold on a second. Okay. Well, it didn't take long for House conservatives, after filing or looking to file articles of impeachment against Deputy Director Rod Rosenstein, to walk that back. Oops, my bad. I guess we're not going to actually impeach Rosenstein after all. Now, there's an update, of course, here on this. Turns out that Mark Meadows says, well, you know what? We're going to temporarily table this motion to impeach Rod Rosenstein because I had some talks with several Republicans and we came up with this agreement, right? So I'm not going to impeach. But they are, according to The Hill, going to pursue contempt if the Justice Department does not turn over documents Congress is seeking. Now, I'll get to the details on the documents they're looking for. But first, let me give you some of the details from a Politico article that I saw last night when this broke. Now, the articles of impeachment that were previously on the table accuse Rosenstein of failing to appoint a second special counsel to review the FBI's actions in the Russia probe, a demand some Republicans have been making for months. They also note that Rosenstein himself could be a witness to elements of Mueller's investigation and say that he should recuse himself. Subsequent articles also fault Rosenstein for refusing to provide certain documents and concealing others, allegations the Justice Department had sharply denied. Now, look, concealing documents, of course, related to the Russia and Clinton investigations, because that's exactly what they're looking for. We want all the documents related to the Clinton investigation into her emails And then we also want all the documents related to the Mueller investigation. But right now, the Mueller investigation is an open investigation. Rod Rosenstein isn't able to give them all the information because it might consider, or it might have classified materials. So now the articles of impeachment, they continue, also chastise Rosenstein for refusing to share with lawmakers the memo outlining the scope of Mueller's investigation. Now, the Justice Department has refused that request on the grounds that it would impede the ongoing probe. So that's what happens here. So some of this stuff, as you can see, Rosenstein is not at the liberty to share with Congress, right? Especially with partisans in Congress like Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan. And it's because of the nature of the investigation. Now, that said, why are they demanding these articles? Or, I'm sorry, why are they demanding these documents and then saying, we're going to hold you in contempt or we're going to try to impeach you if you don't give us these documents? Well, it's because they're looking to politicize the investigation. Now, why would they want to do that? Well, because if a decision or something is found in the investigation and Mueller comes up and he finishes the investigation and sort of hands down his findings, well then, depending on what those findings are, Republicans want to be ready to basically discredit them. Oh, it's a political investigation. Look, Rosenstein didn't want to give over the documents because he's playing politics. Rosenstein, by the way, is a registered Republican. He's a conservative. And he's being attacked by fellow conservatives. In fact, before this was tabled, you had Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, and 11 other very conservative members of the House that were on board for this move, that actually signed on. Now, that, of course, did not involve any of the GOP leadership. So this measure was dead on arrival. So that's why Jim Jordan's, and Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows are like, you know what, we're just going to go back and we're going to hold it in contempt instead, if you don't turn over the documents. Now, let me get to more of the documents here on how many they actually wanted. The Justice Department actually shared so far 880,000 pages of documents connected with the Clinton probe, or connected to the Clinton probe with the Judiciary and Oversight Committees. Not only that, but they also invited staff and lawmakers of the Justice Department to review documents in person and negotiate over access to sensitive material. So that's what the Justice Department is saying, like, hey man, we have been cooperating. So why are you going to try to do impeachment articles, or why are you trying to hold us in contempt when we're already turning over the documents as fast as we can on this Clinton investigation? And just the fact that it's now the Clinton investigation, that this is a part of it, it kind of shows you that this is absolutely partisan. So now let me go back to The Hill on this one that talks about this. Now, when asked if he does not, this is Meadows here, when asked if he does not receive the documents they are seeking by the time the House returns from their August recess, Meadows says, quote, I think the very first order of business would be moving the House to a contempt vote. Now, look, would a contempt vote be easier to get to than an impeachment? Likely so. So, if they don't get their documents, what? Contempt. Amazing, huh? Now, he also had a warning. He said this would be the Department of Justice and the FBI's one last chance to comply. Comply or else. I hope we can avoid impeachment and hopefully avoid contempt and get the documents. But certainly both of those things are on the table and remain on the table to have more of a contempt process. Both options remain there. So even though he's not pushing what would be a dead impeachment vote anyway, because he doesn't have Republican leadership on board, he still says, well, it's on the table. It's on the table. I mean, come on. We'll do it. I mean, don't make us do it. Just give us what we want. Sensitive material related to the investigation into Russia. That's what we want. And we also want to make this incredibly political so that if Mueller hands down something that is not in our favor, that is not in Donald Trump's favor, well, then we can just say politicized. It's classic. It's classic Republicans, man. Look, I said before, all they want is the ability to remove Rosenstein. And I think that involves muddying the waters and making this a political investigation so that then they can signal to Donald Trump that it's okay to fire Rosenstein because now we've painted him as a political actor, and so you can frame him as part of the witch hunt more successfully with the press or with your, especially with your followers. In fact, they're already there, but with more of the general public. And then they get rid of Rosenstein. They can appoint somebody different, and then that person can fire Mueller and put an effective stop to the Mueller investigation. That is one big way to cover their ass, and I believe that this is just a part of going in that direction. Okay. Anyway, there's that. Moving on. Let's get away from that. We'll get to some positive news here. It's like the most Republican cup I have. Golf clubs. You know that a majority of my dishes are actually given to me by family? I've never like bought like a stack of plates. Ever. A little bit of an inside baseball here. Okay, anyway. Senator Bernie Sanders has now introduced legislation to end the cash bail system. So this is pretty important. Now, Sanders' bill, introduced without co-sponsors, also important and maybe not the greatest thing, would end the use of secured bonds in federal court proceedings, provide grants to states that decide to implement alternate pretrial systems, and withhold grants from states that use money bail systems. So now the reason, of course, that I say that it's not great that there's no co-sponsors because it doesn't look like this bill has majority bipartisan support, which, as I'm going to point out later on, should not be the case because this has already been done. But anyway, let's go further into the article. Now, speaking of course, other efforts, Representative Ted Lieu also introduced a companion bill in the House. So, look, this is just getting started. Maybe more co-sponsors will join in. Hopefully, he can get some of the more progressive members of the Senate, and Ted Lieu can get more progressive members of the House to sign on to this. This is actually a really good piece of legislation. Now, in his statement, Sanders, when he introduced it, said, quote, "Poverty is not a crime, and hundreds of thousands of Americans convicted of nothing should not be in jail today because they cannot afford cash bail." He said, in the year 2018 in the United States, we should not continue having a debtor prison system. Oh, absolutely. Now, here's the funny thing, right? So, look, before this was brought up as an issue for me a couple of years ago, I actually didn't think about it before. And I know that's crazy to say, but it's sort of an admission, right? That here was a blind spot that I had before learning about this issue. I mean, because beforehand, it's like, well, yeah, of course, cash bail. Yeah, that makes sense, right? You want to get out of jail early? Of course you should pay. Well, and I'm telling you that because I think to a lot of people, it doesn't occur to them how much of a messed up system this actually really is. I mean, when you think about it, it's kind of like, hey, wait a minute. What about the people who don't have the money, who are there for something that's possibly minor? For example, possession. Possession of marijuana, for example, nonviolent crime. Literally doesn't hurt anybody. But you're caught with possession, you get put in jail, you don't have bail money to get out, well, then I guess it looks like you're going to be sitting there for a while. Just because you don't have the money. So, now, of course, there are things called bail bondsmen, right? But there's big problems with that as well. A bail bondsman can actually charge around 10 to 15% of the total bail amount. So that is just a fee. It's a flat fee where they get to make money on that bond. So great. So here you have a system that makes you borrow money with a 10 to 15% upfront fee that on money that you have to take out just so that you don't sit in jail. I mean, really. That, of course, sets up a system where people with money can get out of jail. Yeah, hey, man, you do something wrong, you can bail yourself out if you've got a lot of money. And then you can walk free until your court date. Whereas, if you don't have the money, well, you're stuck. You're going to sit in jail. And it's a gross system. And the thing is, we're kind of conditioned to think that this is now normal. I mean, of course, if you have money, you shouldn't be able to sit in jail. I mean, look, if you have money, likely you're successful. And if you're successful, you're important. You're more important to that person or than that person that doesn't have that money. It's just another reminder that what we have right now is a two-tiered justice system. Now, what's good is that right now 35 states are actually considering money bail legislation this year to change that. Because Senator Sanders is right, this does set up a debtor's prison style system. Now, New Jersey, for example, an appeals court also held up a key portion of the state's bail reforms, which eliminated cash bail for most criminal defendants and allowed judges to decide whether or not to detain them. Now, of course, after that happened, the bail bond industry was not happy. Guess what? Here's their defense of that system. Oh, well, I mean, look, the new system could favor dangerous criminals. So here's why that argument is bullshit. So, again, this would allow judges to decide whether to detain people, right, or let them go without having to have a bail system. So, do you think a judge is going to look at somebody who's a violent offender, right, a violent criminal, and go, free to go? I mean, until court date, of course, then you have to come back. But yeah, no, go ahead. We don't need to detain you at all. We trust you. That's not going to happen. That is very, very unlikely to happen. So that, of course, that is an industry talking point. It's going to help the criminals. It's going to help the violent criminals get out of jail and then run. No, it's not. Again, any smart judge is going to use their judgment to see whether or not that person deserves to go free until their trial date. So, but anyway, look, the whole reason that they're coming up with that, of course, is try to scare people because this is their revenue. Just like any industry that's built around something, whether it be the private prison industry, which is built around the whole idea of incarcerating Americans, they will try to protect themselves even when what they're doing is not only morally wrong, it's fiscally wrong, and also just damages the community and puts innocent people in prison for literally nothing. So I'm actually really happy to see legislation like this. And I think we need, like Bernie Sanders needs more co-sponsors. Ted Lieu needs more co-sponsors. We need to get this through. And look, a lot of you might be saying, but Republicans, conservatives are totally against this. Well, there happens to be one. I guess he doesn't really count as a Republican, but this is Rand Paul. Now, Rand Paul last year actually had his own piece of legislation that did basically the same thing. Not only that, but here you had Kamala Harris also having her own piece of legislation. And to be fair, both of them beat Bernie Sanders to the punch. So that's good because there might be some potential bipartisanship to be had here. And that could actually lead to a good piece of legislation getting through Congress. I know that's scary. And it doesn't happen very often when they actually work together because most of the time when Republicans and Democrats work together, it's to screw us. However, occasionally, something good might actually get through, and I'm hoping this could be one of them, because this could help lots and lots of people, especially poor people, minorities, that get caught up in our two-tier justice system. So, props for Bernie on that one. Okay. More Sanders news, and this is great. So Michigan gubernatorial candidate Abdul al-Sayed just received a massive endorsement. Now, on his Twitter account, Senator Bernie Sanders, a little-known senator from Vermont, officially endorsed Sayed. Now, Sayed, of course, is the former Detroit public health chief for, as I said, Detroit, and also a doctor, and he is running for governor of Michigan. Now, I live in Michigan, so I think this is actually fantastic news. Now, let me give you the tweet here. Sanders said, "I'm proud to endorse Abdul al-Sayed for governor of Michigan. As governor, Dr. al-Sayed will fight for a government in Lansing that represents all the people and not just wealthy special interests." He also said, under Abdul al-Sayed's leadership, Michigan can help lead the nation in guaranteeing health care for all through a Medicare for all single-payer type system, tuition-free public colleges and universities, a minimum wage of $15 per hour, and strong environmental protections. Now, on the health care for all through a Medicare for all system, that would actually be through a state system. Now, that is interesting. In fact, I'm going to get into that a little bit later, and then, of course, into his competition. But first, the response from al-Sayed says, "I'm honored to have the support of Bernie Sanders and thankful that he has recognized there is only one progressive running for governor of Michigan. I look forward to carrying his progressive mantle forward to solve problems for Michiganders as governor." So, now, if you're not following this election, you should be. Because it's actually really, really important. Michigan is an interesting state. Of course, we used to be a blue state. Now we're a red state. Donald Trump won Michigan in the general election in 2016. However, Bernie Sanders pulled out a surprise upset win against Hillary Clinton in the 2016 Democratic primaries. So you don't know what way Michigan is going to go. And look, living here in Michigan for my entire life, I've seen a lot of terrible things happen to our state. Of course, happen to manufacturing, things that happen to Flint, which still does not have clean water. We saw a lot of gentrification, jobs pulling out, things like that. So Michigan has a lot of issues, and right now, under Republican control, none of those issues are being addressed. So, obviously, we need to do something. Now, in the Democratic primary, which comes up August 7th, so, by the way, on that, all hands on deck, man. So, I'm going to give you some information at the end of this video on how you can help. But first, we have three candidates. We've got the establishment candidate, Gretchen Whitmer. Now, she's your corporate, kind of Hillary Clinton-ish Democrat. And she calls herself a progressive, but really she's more of the centrist position. Better than the Republicans for sure, but she is the center, establishment corporate Democrat. She takes money from dark money groups and all that. Now, you also have al-Sayed, of course, who is the true progressive in the race. And then you have self-made businessman Sri Dhanadhar. Now, according to The Intercept, which has done great coverage on this, al-Sayed actually has hired veteran Sanders organizers to run his campaign, and he has crafted policy seemingly designed to appeal to the senator's supporters. In particular, al-Sayed's uniquely detailed state-level single-payer plan sets him apart from his primary opponents, who have either declined to support a Michigan single-payer plan or have offered support in name only. Now, of course, Whitmer is not in favor of single-payer, but Dhanadhar, well, he's kind of an interesting person there that I have some reservations on. Now, going back to The Intercept, a different article, Jelani wrote that he talked to people. He talked to Dhanadhar, and he found him well, basically, he was a little skeptical that he was as progressive as he claimed. In fact, investigations by The Intercept revealed many facts which cast doubt on Tanadar's progressive branding. He had donated thousands of dollars to Senator John McCain's presidential campaign. He was spotted clapping and nodding approvingly at a Marco Rubio presidential rally, and several Michigan political consultants have claimed that Tanadar once consulted them about possibly running in this race as a Republican. Well, now, wait a minute. You can't run as a Republican and then vote for Senator John McCain and go to Marco Rubio rallies. I mean, I guess you could go to Marco Rubio rallies, but nodding and clapping along doesn't seem all that progressive. Now, furthermore, Jelani decided to sit down with Tanadar and have a conversation. Now, the candidate made it clear, he wrote, if elected, he would push the federal government to establish a single-payer plan. So that just kind of shows you the popularity. If somebody like Tanadar, who considered running as a Republican, is looking at the polls on single-payer and going, people like this plan, maybe I'm going to run on it, right? And who knows? Maybe he actually is in favor of it. Well, let's see, okay? Because there's more. Now, when asked what he would do if a national single-payer plan had failed, Tanadar struggled to offer a viable state-level solution. Now, when Jelani pressed him on what a Michigan state single-payer system would look like, Tanadar's answer, he writes, reflected a troubling ignorance about the difference between federal and state programs. He said, quote, I would expand the Medicare and allow people to buy into it. I will expand the Medicare. But wait, Medicare is a federal program. Now, look, if you're talking about Medicaid, well, okay. Expanding Medicaid to everybody, that would be a pretty good plan. Okay. But he put a qualifier in there and said, I will allow people to buy into it. Okay, so first of all, he references a federal program, not a state program, and then says, I'll let people buy into it. Well, that's not Medicare for all. That's a public option. That is like a state-level Medicare X, which is what the Democratic Party has floated as a public option. Now, if you don't know the difference between a single payer and a public option, then you're probably not as progressive as you claim to be. So that is a big strike against Tanadar. Okay. Now, I've got more. Jelani asks, and so you're fine putting everyone in Michigan into one government plan and not having private insurance in Michigan? Because that's what a single-payer plan is. And throughout the entire interview, he's like, I'm in favor of single-payer. I'm in favor of Medicare for all. Here's his answer. Quote, I'm not saying that. Now, the follow-up is, but that's what single-payer is, though, by definition. Right? Tanadar's answer, it is. I'm for single-payer. It's a complex system. It needs to be all worked out. We need to get experts. We need to draft a proposal and some great numbers of details in it. And all of that needs leadership and a commitment by the leadership. And I'm not coming in with a solution to every complex problem Michigan has, but I'm coming in with a commitment to provide leadership. Turns out I don't actually have a plan. I mean, I want to expand the Medicare, but I have no plan. But I can provide leadership. Well, that's not what you're saying. You're saying I want a Medicare for all system when you don't even describe accurately what a Medicare for all single payer system is. That is government sponsored insurance that takes over for all private insurance. Now, of course, you could have insurance companies play a very small role in maybe selling supplemental plans, but it all depends. It depends on what kind of system that you want to set up. But a true single-payer plan involves no private insurance. So, now, El Sayed, of course, a lot different. He actually does have a plan. Jelani writes, El Sayed has a detailed strategy for how to accomplish a real single-payer system. In fact, last month he released a plan to establish something called MichiCare. Now, Michicare would levy payroll and business taxes to establish a state-funded public coverage for all Michigan residents. That actually is single payer. Here, we're going to tax you, and then we're going to use that money to cover everybody with insurance. Now, Al Sayed, he's like, yes, we're going to raise taxes on you. But then you're actually going to save money. In fact, he estimates that the average Michigan family earning an income of $48,432 would save around $5,000 a year in costs by switching to Michicare from their private health insurance provider. So he actually has a detailed plan. Unlike, of course, what you have with Shree, and of course, Whitmer has basically no plan for single payer or public option. Just like, hey, I helped expand Medicaid. Great. Yeah, that helped a lot of people. Over 600,000 Michiganders. Wonderful. But what are you going to do for the people who don't have insurance, or who have insurance but can't afford their deductible? Or they have junk insurance plans. What are you going to do to solve the for-profit insurance problem with rising premiums and people that don't have enough money to afford those premiums? What are you going to do for that? Nothing. Because she doesn't have a plan, because she is the status quo candidate. She is the establishment candidate. So, now, here's the thing. There's a problem here. We know who the true progressive is, but most of the state doesn't. Shree actually is leading in the polls over El Sayed. Now again, Shree says, I'm the most progressive in the race. Look at my plan. I support single payer. I supported Bernie Sanders. I support all this. He's actually leading in the polls over Tanadar with 17% of the vote. Al Sayed has about 12% according to polls. And of course, Whitmer, unfortunately, is leading with about 39% of the vote. Now, the Sanders endorsement might actually help. And I'm hoping that it does. But there's not a lot of time. The primary is actually August 7th. So it's coming up really, really fast. Now, not only has Sanders endorsed El Sayed, but also Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's coming to Flint, Grand Rapids, and Detroit, all of the state to go and stump for El Sayed. You also have endorsements from the Justice Democrats. You have Our Revolution backing El Sayed. He's got to get more traction. And the reason that he doesn't get traction is because, look, Tanadar and Whitmer both take dark money. Well, okay, Whitmer takes dark money. Tanadar does not take dark money, but he's self-funded because he's a millionaire. So he's very wealthy. He can afford to pay for political ads. So they go and they flood the airwaves with their political ads, and El Sayed does not have that money to be able to do that. So that explains why El Sayed is actually behind, even though he's got the most. He's not only the most progressive, but he actually has some of the better plans, and actually a way to make those plans into fruition. He's actually serious about Medicare for all, unlike the others. So let me tell you how you can help, right? First you can go to map.abdulformichigan.com, put in your zip code, and figure out how you can phone bank. So what they need is volunteers, okay? So go there, volunteer to phone bank, knock on doors. They're trying to get out the vote, and it's not money that's going to do it. It's people power. And so if you live in Michigan, go and sign up. Find a way for you to phone bank and become a volunteer and help Abdul Al Sayed, because I believe he is the true progressive in the race. They're also looking for, and I'm going to have links in this, okay? So if you want to find a field office or a volunteer, or be a volunteer, or canvas or phone bank or wherever, I will have a link here in the description. So it's called Knock Your Block, the plan to go and knock on doors. So go sign up for that, so we can actually have a true progressive that can win. And for those of you who say, but he's so far behind, just remember, Bernie Sanders in the polls was 30 points behind, and he won Michigan by 2 points. One of the biggest upsets of the 2016 election. If Bernie could do it, why not Abdul? Okay. I'm going to take a quick break here. We'll come back. We got the story about Assange. So stay right here. Around the Nation. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. If you haven't already, please like and share the stream. Also, please consider using the super chat. You can, super chat me story ideas, things that you want to cover, things I might have missed, or just general comments or questions or anything like that. Jeff will read the teleprompter. Anything you put in it, I will read anything in the super chat. I probably shouldn't say that. Anyway, but I just did. Can't take it back. Okay. Anyway, let's move on. Very important story here about Julian Assange and the future of the First Amendment. Moving on. Okay. So The Intercept here with a report that could be disastrous for journalism. Now, Ecuador will immediately withdraw asylum for Julian Assange and hand him over to the UK. So that's in a piece titled, that is the title of the piece written by Glenn Greenwald. So look, before I get into this, I have my own issues with Assange, and I kind of want to lay them out first, because I'm not defending his political views. I don't even know his political views, right? But I do know he had a certain political preference during the 2016 election. He wanted Donald Trump to win, right? He favored Trump to win and Democrats to lose. Now, obviously, I disagree with that because I think Republicans, we see the damage the Republicans are doing right now to a lot of different things. So, as far as his personal politics, not in favor. And look, maybe I think he had a good reason to despise the Democrats because of what happened during the Obama administration, him making sure to, WikiLeaks, of course, releasing information that the Obama administration did not want out there. So, look, I don't know, right? I'm not here to defend his beliefs. And look, I think it was massively wrong in thinking the Republicans would be better for press freedom. That said, WikiLeaks is actually really important to democracy. So you actually need a transparent and open press that is able to leak things that are uncomfortable for the government that people should know in order to have a functional democracy. So what WikiLeaks did in releasing the DNC emails, for example, they're actually really important because they showed the corruption inside the DNC. And now what we can do with that information is use that information to actually fight the corruption inside the DNC and to rip out that tumor. That's what we want to do. Okay? Now, that said, I do wish WikiLeaks had fought just as hard to release information on the RNC. Just saying. Now, again, both of those things said, I give WikiLeaks a lot of credit. For example, releasing video, thanks to Chelsea Manning, that showed our Apache helicopters gunning down innocent people in Iraq, all while soldiers laughed about it. I think that's an important thing. So we see where our tax money is actually going. So that's actually what journalism is supposed to be. You're releasing that information about what we're actually doing. That's why what's happening is disastrous. Now, let me get to what Greenwald wrote. Ecuadoria's President Lenin Moreno traveled to London on Friday for the ostensible purpose of speaking at the 2018 Global Disability Summit. Now, Moreno has been using a wheelchair since being shot in a 1998 robbery attempt. Now, the concealed actual purpose of the president's trip is to meet with British officials to finalize an agreement under which Ecuador will withdraw its asylum protection of Julian Assange. In place since 2012, eject him from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and then hand over the WikiLeaks founder to British authorities. Now, Moreno's itinerary also notably includes a trip to Madrid, where he will meet with Spanish officials still seething over Assange's denunciation of human rights abuses perpetrated by Spain's central government against protesters marching for Catalonian independence. Almost 3 months ago, Ecuador blocked Assange from accessing the internet, and Assange has not been able to communicate with the outside world ever since. The primary factor in Ecuador's decision to silence him was Spanish anger over Assange's tweets about Catalonia. Now, a source close to the Ecuadorian Foreign Ministry in the president's office, unauthorized to speak publicly, has confirmed to The Intercept that Moreno is close to finalizing, if he has not already finalized, an agreement to hand over Assange to the UK within the next several weeks. The withdrawal of asylum and physical ejection of Assange could come as early as next week. On Friday, RT reported that Ecuador was preparing to enter into such agreement. Now, the consequences of such an agreement depend in part on the concessions Ecuador extracts in exchange for withdrawing Assange's asylum. But as former Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa told The Intercept in an interview in May, Moreno's government has returned Ecuador to a highly subservient and submissive posture towards Western governments. It is thus highly unlikely that Moreno, who has shown himself to be willing to submit to threats and coercion from the UK, Spain, and the US, will obtain a guarantee that the UK not extradite Assange to the US, where top Donald Trump officials have vowed to prosecute Assange and destroy WikiLeaks. So, basically, here you have a chain of events being set up that will unfold and lead to the final extradition of Julian Assange to the United States. Now, that actually will end up with at least the founder of WikiLeaks being imprisoned and for publishing material that was classified. And what they say, is in national interest that this does not get released. Well, how does that video of U.S. soldiers gunning down Iraqi civilians, how is keeping that hidden in the national interest? But it's not. It's not in the national interest. So that's the thing here, right? So this is more than just about Assange. It's actually more than just about WikiLeaks as well. I mean, you can't argue that this information should have been kept private, away from the public. This is what our, government is doing in our name. This is what our tax money is going for. You guys are paying for this. Do you like the fact that our money goes to bomb innocent people overseas? Well, you can thank WikiLeaks for exposing what we're actually doing, bombing innocent people, killing innocent people. They expose that, right? That's their function, to expose the shady things the government is engaged in. Now, look, as progressives, I know we put a lot of stock in the government, but also realize the government also does a lot of shady things. So you have to have organizations there that are willing to hold them accountable. So, and I think that's why we need those organizations that are dedicated to transparency in the First Amendment. Now, if we prosecute Assange and go after WikiLeaks for doing journalism, right, regardless of their motive, by the way, it's actually really dangerous to the First Amendment and freedom of the press. Okay? This would allow the government, who does hide things from us, to effectively have a precedent to arrest and charge reporters for reporting on those things, not for stealing classified data. WikiLeaks did not steal the DNC emails. All they did is that they were handed the emails and then they reported on them. And you could substitute WikiLeaks for any of the other establishment media sources, New York Times, for example. Are you okay with arresting New York Times sources for reporting on things that are classified? I would hope not, if you actually do believe in a fair and open press. And again, despite your personal feelings about Assange or your personal feelings about WikiLeaks, this is bigger than that. This is more big picture, right? The implication here is wide-ranging, and none of those implications are good. And if you think that none of this will happen, just remember, we're under full Republican control now. Republicans, conservatives are authoritarians, okay? And the courts, because of that, are also incredibly right-wing and can rule against press freedom. Look, they're more apt to silence journalists that might embarrass them and reveal what they're actually doing. And here's the irony, right? The Trump administration. Now, Donald Trump, I could show you videos of Trump saying, "Oh, I love what WikiLeaks is doing. Keep releasing those emails," right? Well, now, here's the Trump administration, that same administration, now putting a knife in the back of Assange. Well, there you go. Now that we're in power, we don't want our secrets exposed. That's how authoritarians get power. And look, they already have it. I've reported on this before. Again, thanks to WikiLeaks and other organizations and actual journalism, right? We know that the NSA spies on us, thanks to Edward Snowden. They vacuum up our metadata, okay? We no longer have habeas corpus. There's indefinite detention in this country. We have all these different problems, all these different abuses and challenges to our Fourth Amendment rights to search and, to protect against search and seizure of our information and of our property. And now, what, are we going to be okay with them coming from press freedom just because some of us might not like Assange or what he did or the fact that he preferred Donald Trump in the election, which I think, again, was incredibly stupid? Look, it doesn't matter your personal feelings, is what I'm trying to say. There are bigger issues. We've got to look at this big picture and long term, right? And if the government is successful in going after WikiLeaks for reporting this stuff, then that means the end of the First Amendment. That's the end of press freedom. And if you care about these things, then you should be incredibly worried, as I am. Okay. Moving on. One more story here. All right. So recently, an MSNBC host decided that they were going to actually challenge corporations when it comes to corporate welfare. Let's take a look.
A comprehensive report from UC Berkeley's Labor Center studied working families who rely on public assistance programs like Medicaid and CHIP, the Basic Household Income Assistance Program, Temporary Aid to Needy Families, and Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. That means U.S. taxpayers are footing the bill. That's about $153 billion every year. The Intercept and the New Food Economy examined this problem, focusing specifically on Amazon employees using SNAP food benefits. In the state of Arizona, please listen to this, 1 in every 3 of Amazon employees depend on SNAP to put food on their family's table. In Pennsylvania and Ohio, the figure appears to be about 1 in 10. The president, for his part, consistently picks fights with Amazon about their use of the U.S. Postal Service for deliveries and their dominance in the retail market, and even Jeff Bezos owning the Washington Post. But here's what makes no sense. None of those touch the legitimate criticisms of Amazon. You want to criticize Amazon? I'm going to help you do that right now. But what the president is going after is nonsense. When jobs do not pay enough, workers turn to public assistance in order to meet their basic needs. And that burden is falling on taxpayers. But when the head of that company, paying low wages, happens to be the richest man in modern history, let me remind you of this. Jeff Bezos on Amazon Prime Day became worth $150 billion. When he's worth that much money, you begin to start asking the question, are companies like this, who are paying their employees so little, gaming the system?
Are they gaming the system? Yes. Yes, they are. I mean, hey, that's a simple answer. Yeah, of course they are. So look, this is interesting and fun for a couple of reasons, right? For one, here you have MSNBC actually criticizing a corporation for paying its workers so little that they have to get on food stamps. MSNBC! I know, they're supposed to be in the liberal station, but normally they spend, they spend 99% of their time, it seems like, on Russia. So for them to actually talk about how, hey, it turns out this really, really rich person is not paying his employees very well at all, even though he's worth $150 billion. So I like that one of their commentators is actually calling out that obscene level of wealth compared to their workers, right? Now, it's also a good thing, right? Because this actually shows how our message is starting to resonate. It's actually winning. Stephanie Ruhle is no progressive, right? But what she did is she basically made an argument for A, taxing the rich, and B, a living wage. I mean, when jobs do not pay enough, workers turn to public assistance in order to meet their basic needs, and that burden is falling on taxpayers, right? So that's more of like a conservative argument towards that. Like, hey, do you want your tax money going to public assistance while this guy is super rich and he should be able to pay more to his workers? Hey, you know what? That's a good argument. That's even a good argument for conservatives. So that explains why even a lot of conservatives are like, you know what? You're right. Why am I paying for this corporate welfare? Because that's essentially what it is. These and Walmart's another great example of this. They pay their workers so little that they get on food stamps, they get on Medicaid, and guess where they spend that food stamps? They go back and they spend it at Walmart. It's kind of the same thing. So that in itself is a subsidy. They make more money while they use public funds to subsidize themselves. That is a fundamentally broken system. That is fundamentally wrong. And so even conservatives can look at that and go, ooh, you know what? Hey, that's a good point. Why am I paying for that? Why don't you just pay your workers? I mean, I like it when people work. I like it when people make, enough money to survive without having to have government assistance. You know what? Progressives do too. That's something conservatives and progressives actually have in common. We don't like the corporate welfare. We think corporations are already making off with a fantastic deal. For example, the last tax cuts, 83% of it went to the rich, went to corporations. It's time to end that corporate greed. And so I'm telling you, even like Americans are ready for progressive policies. And it kind of shows you when you have establishment MSNBC now echoing progressives on Amazon and talking about gross inequality between companies and their workforce. That's a sign. That's a sign. Democrats, run on these issues. Be strong. Maybe you'll actually get Republican votes. The Republican votes that you so covet might actually be gained through good policy. I know. Crazy, isn't it? Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me. I have a super chat that I would like to read here. Before we go, let me open that up. I did not have that ready. Platypi says, I've had a horrible day. I'm very sorry to hear that. So I'm going to try to put a smile back in my face to try to see how many smiles I can put on other faces. Much love, Jenna. Well, thank you so much. I hope your day gets better. I actually do know about the details of that, but I will not divulge. Let's just say that I understand how that is. And, you can't change everybody's mind. And so you just got to ignore the haters. Even if they're people that might be close to you. So, okay. Probably said too much. But thank you so much. I appreciate that. Maybe we'll talk later. Okay. That's all. That's all I got. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Please give us a like as well. And a share, maybe, or at least go and share out the clips when they get released later on. That said, love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.